The letter trembled in my hands, its edges worn as if it had been clutched 1,000 times before reaching me. My grandmother's elegant cursive spelled out my name Claire in the envelope, but it was the weight of her words inside that pinned me to the floor. She'd left me everything, a crumbling old house in the middle of nowhere and a single, cryptic sentence about the treasure within. I was 35, single, and scraping by as a freelance illustrator in a city that chewed up dreams like mine. The news of Grandma Rose's passing hit like a punch. But the inheritance, that was a cruel joke to my family. My Uncle Richard, with his polished suits and perpetual sneer, laughed first. A shack in Willow Creek. Clara, you've inherited a money pit. Aunt Margaret, her pearls clinking as she tossed her head, chimed in. You'd be lucky to sell it for scrap. Even my cousin Tom, who'd always acted like he was above us all, smirked over his whiskey glass at the family gathering. What's next? Clara, panning for gold in the backyard. Their mockery stung, but it wasn't new. Growing up, I was the quiet one, the dreamer who'd rather sketch in Grandma's attic than fight for attention at family dinners. Grandma Rose had been my refuge, her stories of adventure and hidden wonders filling my childhood with magic. Now, she was gone, and her gift to me was a punchline. I didn't care about their opinions. I never had, but the dismissal of her memory cut deeper than I'd expected. I drove to Willow Creek the next weekend, the city fading into rolling hills and endless sky. The house was exactly as they described, a sagging Victorian with peeling paint and a porch that groaned under my weight. But standing there, I felt her. Grandma's laughter, her wildflower perfume, the way she'd whisper, Clara, the world's full of secrets if you know where to look. I wasn't here for a treasure hunt. I was here to feel close to her again. Inside, the air was thick with dust, and the furniture was draped in sheets like ghosts. I wandered through rooms frozen in time, my fingers tracing the banister she'd once slid down as a girl. In her study, I found it, a locked wooden box on her desk, small enough to hold in one hand, with a key taped to its lid. My heart raced as I turned the key, half expecting gold or jewels. Instead, there was a single piece of papyri deed to a plot of land behind the house, marked with an X and the words, "Dig here." I laughed, the sound echoing in the empty room. Dig here. It felt like one of Grandma's games, the kind she'd invent to keep me busy on summer afternoons. But her games always led somewhere. I grabbed a shovel from the shed and headed to the backyard, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows. The ground was hard, but I dug, sweat mixing with the dirt on my hands. 2 feet down, the shovel hit something solid. A metal chest, no bigger than a shoebox, rusted but intact. My breath caught as I pried it open. Inside was no treasure, at least, not the kind anyone would recognize. There were letters, dozens of them, tied with twine, alongside a small leather journal. The letters were addressed to Grandma from someone named Eliza, written in a looping hand that spoke of love and loss. The journal was Grandma's, filled with sketches of plants, maps of the property, and notes about the grove. One entry stood out. The true treasure isn't gold, it's the life we grow. I sat back on my heels, confused but intrigued. What was she trying to tell me? That night, I pored over the journal by lamplight, the house creaking around me. Grandma had written about a hidden grove on the property, a place she and Eliza had tended decades ago. It wasn't just a garden, it was a sanctuary of rare plants, some extinct elsewhere, cultivated over years. She'd never told anyone, not even my mother, because she feared it would be exploited. The final entry read, Clara, if you're reading this, you're the one I trust. Protect it. I barely slept. The next morning, I followed her maps to the grove, hidden behind a tangle of wild roses. It was breathtaking, a pocket of green so lush it felt like stepping into another world. Flowers I'd never seen bloomed in riots of color, and trees bore fruit that looked almost alien. I realized then that Grandma's worthless inheritance was priceless not in dollars, but in legacy. This was her heart, entrusted to me. But word travels fast in families like mine. By the time I returned to the city, my phone was buzzing. Uncle Richard's voice was syrupy sweet. "Clara, dear, I heard you found something interesting. Why don't we discuss it?" Aunt Margaret texted, offering to help manage the property. Tom, predictably, called it a gold mine and suggested we sell it to developers. They hadn't cared about Grandma's house when it was just a shack. Now, they smelled opportunity. I clutched the journal tighter, my resolve hardening. They'd mocked her gift, dismissed her memory. But I saw what they couldn't. This wasn't about money. It was about love, trust, and a promise I intended to keep. They'd come begging soon enough, and I'd be ready not with open hands, but with a truth they weren't prepared to face. The city felt suffocating after the Grove's quiet magic. Back in my cramped apartment, I spread Grandma's journal and letters across my kitchen table, their pages glowing under the dim bulb. Each word from Eliza painted a picture of a woman who'd shared Grandma's dreams, her partner in creating something extraordinary. Their love, forbidden in their time, had been poured into that Grovia living testament to their bond. I traced Grandma's sketches, my fingers lingering on a drawing of a flower labeled Eliza's star, its petals delicate yet fierce. This wasn't just land. It was a story, and I was its keeper. My family's calls grew relentless. Uncle Richard left voicemails, his tone shifting from patronizing to insistent. "Clara, you can't manage that property alone. Let me handle the legal side." Aunt Margaret invited me to dinner, her message dripping with false warmth. "We're family. Darling, we should share everything." Tom was blunt, texting, "Heard there's rare plants out there. Big money in that. Let's talk business." I ignored them all, but their persistence gnawed at me. They hadn't visited Grandma in her final years, hadn't cared when she'd needed them. Now, they circled like vultures. I returned to Willow Creek the next weekend, determined to understand the Grove's value. Armed with Grandma's journal, I cataloged the plants, cross-referencing them with online databases. Some were indeed rare species thought extinct, others prized by botanists. One tree, a hybrid fig, produced fruit that could fetch thousands per pound in niche markets. But Grandma's notes were clear. She hadn't wanted it sold. She'd wanted it protected, a sanctuary for those who understood its worth beyond profit. I contacted a botanist, Dr. Lena Hart, who nearly dropped her phone when I described the grove. She arrived the next day, her eyes wide as she wandered through the greenery. "Clara, this is a botanical gold mine," she said, cradling a flower like it was a newborn. "But it's fragile. One wrong move developers. Over-harvesting and it's gone." She helped me draft a plan to register the grove as a protected site, a process that would take months but could shield it from exploitation. I felt a surge of purpose, but also dread. My family wouldn't wait months. Sure enough, Uncle Richard showed up unannounced, his BMW gleaming in the driveway. "Clara," he said, stepping onto the porch like he owned it, "you're sitting on a fortune. Let's sell the land. Split the profits. Family takes care of family. Right?" His smile was all teeth. I clutched the journal behind my back, my voice steady. "This isn't about money, Richard. It's Grandma's legacy." He laughed, a sharp bark. "Legacy. It's dirt and weeds. Don't be naive." Aunt Margaret arrived the next day, her heels sinking into the lawn. She brought a lawyer, a slick man named Mr. Grayson, who handed me papers about family trusts and shared assets. "Clara, dear," Margaret cooed, "you don't have the resources to maintain this place. We're just trying to help." Her eyes flicked to the grove, greedy and calculating. I refused to sign, my hands shaking with anger. They weren't here for Grandma. They were here for themselves. Tom was the worst. He cornered me in town, his breath sour with coffee. Clara, I looked into it. That land could be worth millions if we clear it for condos. You're not cut out for this. Let me handle it. His condescension burned, but I saw through it. He was drowning in debt. His flashy lifestyle had caught up with him. They all had their reasons. Richard's failing business, Margaret's obsession with status, Tom's reckless spending. Grandma's gift was their lifeline, and they'd tear it apart to save themselves. I drove back to the Grove that night, the stars blazing above. Kneeling in the dirt, I whispered to Grandma, to Eliza, to the plants themselves, I won't let them take this. But doubt crept in. I was one woman against a family who'd always gotten their way. The Grove was safe for now, but their pressure was mounting. I needed a plan not just to protect the land, but to make them see what they'd dismissed. They'd mocked me as the quiet dreamer, the one who'd never fight back. They were wrong. The Grove became my sanctuary, but it was also my battleground. Each weekend, I returned to Willow Creek, my hands blistered from tending the plants, my heart heavy with Grandma's words, protect it. Dr. Hart's guidance was a lifeline. She connected me with a conservation group willing to fund the Grove's protection if I could prove its ecological value. But the clock was ticking. My family's visits grew bolder, their demands sharper. They weren't just asking anymore, they were scheming. Uncle Richard sent an appraiser to the property without my permission. I caught the man snapping photos of the Grove, his clipboard marked with $signs. Just assessing the land's potential, he said, but his eyes betrayed him. Richard had promised him a cut. I ordered him off the property, my voice shaking but firm. That night, I installed a lock on the gate, but it felt like a flimsy shield against their greed. Aunt Margaret tried a different tack. She showed up with a tray of homemade cookies, her smile as fake as her concern. Clara, you're exhausted. Let us take this burden off you. She gestured to the house, the Grove, as if they were problems to be solved. When I refused, her mask slipped. You're being selfish, she snapped. This could save us all. Save them, she meant. Her husband's medical bills were piling up, and she saw the Grove as her ticket out. Tom was the most brazen. He'd researched the plants, probably through some shady contact, and cornered me at a coffee shop. Clara, those trees are worth a fortune. I've got buyers lined up. We split it 50-50, and you walk away rich. His eyes gleamed with desperation. But I saw the truth. He'd sell the Grove to the highest bidder, leaving nothing but stumps. I told him no, and he leaned in close. You'll regret this. Clara, we're family, but we're not saints. Their words echoed my childhood, when they dismissed my drawings as cute or my dreams as unrealistic. Grandma had been the only one to see me, to believe in me. Now, her trust felt like both a gift and a burden. I couldn't let them destroy what she'd built, but I was running out of time. The conservation group needed detailed documentation photos, soil samples, plant inventories before they'd commit. I worked late into the nights, my laptop glowing with spreadsheets and research. One evening, as I photographed the Grove, I found a hidden patch of Eliza's star flowers, their petals glowing under the moonlight. Grandma's journal described them as her favorite, a symbol of resilience. I sat among them, tears stinging my eyes. I wasn't just fighting for Landy, was fighting for her, for Eliza, for the part of myself I'd buried under years of doubt. But the pressure was crushing me. Richard had mentioned legal options, and Margaret had hinted at contesting the will. I needed help, but I didn't know who to trust. Then came a breakthrough. Dr. Hart introduced me to a lawyer, Sarah Nguyen, who specialized in environmental law. Sarah was fierce, her eyes sharp as she reviewed Grandma's deed and journal. This is airtight, she said. The land is yours, and we can protect it as a private reserve. But your family's not going to stop. We need to outmaneuver them. She suggested a public campaign to raise awareness about the Grove, framing it as a community treasure. The idea terrified me. I'd always shied away from attention, but it felt right. Grandma's story deserved to be told. I started small, posting photos of the grove on social media, sharing snippets of Grandma's journal. The response was overwhelming. Botanists, locals, even strangers reached out, offering support. A local news outlet picked up the story, calling the grove a hidden gem of Willow Creek. My family noticed. Richard's calls turned frantic. "Clara, you're making this harder than it needs to be." Margaret sent a passive-aggressive email about family unity. Tom stopped calling altogether, which worried me more. The grove was no longer a secret, and neither was my resolve. I wasn't the quiet girl they'd mocked anymore. I was Clara, keeper of Grandma's legacy, and I'd fight with everything I had. But as the conservation paperwork neared completion, I knew the real battle was coming. They'd mocked my inheritance as worthless. Soon, they'd see its true value and they'd come begging. The Grove story spread like wildfire, and with it, my family's desperation. The local news feature had painted Willow Creek as a haven of rare beauty. And suddenly, strangers were stopping me in town to ask about Rose's Grove. I'd named it after Grandma, a small act of defiance against those who'd dismissed her. But the attention brought new threats. Richard hired a lawyer to challenge the will, claiming Grandma wasn't of sound mind when she left everything to me. Margaret spread rumors that I was hoarding the land for personal gain. Tom, silent for weeks, reappeared with a new tactic, charm. He showed up at the house one crisp morning, his usual arrogance replaced by a sheepish grin. "Clara, I was wrong," he said, hands in his pockets. "I didn't get it. Let me help you protect the grove." His sincerity was as convincing as a used car salesman's. But I played along, curious. Over coffee, he suggested a partnership to turn the grove into a tourist attraction, guided tours, gift shops, the works. "We'll keep it eco-friendly," he promised. But his eyes betrayed him. He saw dollar signs, not flowers. I declined, politely but firmly. Tom's mask slipped. "You're making a mistake," he snapped, storming out. That night, I found tire tracks near the grove's entrance. Someone had tried to break the lock. My stomach churned. They weren't just begging anymore. They were plotting. Sarah, my lawyer, urged me to install cameras and file a restraining order if needed. "They're desperate," she said. "Desperate people do stupid things." The conservation group was close to approving the grove as a protected reserve, but they needed one final survey. Dr. Hart and I spent days cataloging every plant, our hands stained with soil and sap. The grove felt alive, its colors sharper, its air sweeter, as if it knew we were fighting for it. But the joy of discovery was tainted by fear. Richard's lawyer sent a letter demanding access to the property for an independent evaluation. Margaret called, her voice trembling with fake tears. "Clara, you're tearing this family apart." I hung up, my hands shaking. They weren't family, they were strangers who shared my blood. Then came the betrayal. My mother, who'd stayed silent through it all, called me late one night. "Clara, I know you love that place," she said, her voice soft. "But Richard says it could help us all. Maybe you should share." I felt like I'd been slapped. Mom had never been close to Grandma, always too busy with her own life. But I'd hoped she'd understand. "Mom," I said, my voice breaking, "this is Grandma's heart. You're asking me to sell it." She sighed and hung up. For the first time, I felt truly alone. The public campaign grew stronger, though. A local artist painted a mural of Eliza's star in town, and a school group asked to visit the grove for a field trip. I agreed, watching kids marvel at the plants, their laughter echoing Grandma's stories. It reminded me why I was fighting, not just for her, but for everyone who'd find wonder in this place. But the victory was bittersweet. Richard's lawyer filed a motion to freeze the property's status until the will was reviewed. Sarah fought back. But the legal fees were draining my savings. One night, exhausted, I sat in the grove, the journal open in my lap. Grandma's words blurred through my tears. The world's full of secrets if you know where to look. I'd found her secret, her treasure, but it came with a cost. My family's greed was a storm, and I was standing in its path. I whispered to the flowers, to Grandma, to Eliza, I'm trying. I'm trying so hard. The wind rustled the leaves, and for a moment, I felt her with me. The next morning, Sarah called with news. The conservation group had expedited the survey. We had 1 week to finalize the paperwork. If we succeeded, the grove would be untouchable. If we failed, Richard's lawyer would tear it apart. The stakes were higher than ever, and my family knew it. They'd come begging soon, not for forgiveness, but for a share of what they'd never valued. I wasn't ready to forgive, but I was ready to fight. The week before the conservation hearing felt like a lifetime. Every moment was a race against time, against my family, against the doubt creeping into my heart. Sarah and I worked around the clock, finalizing documents, gathering expert testimonies, and rallying community support. The Grove story had spread beyond Willow Creek, with botanists from across the country offering to testify about its ecological value. But Richard's lawyer was relentless, filing motions to delay the hearing, claiming I was unfit to manage the property. Each letter felt like a blade, slicing at my resolve. Aunt Margaret escalated things. She organized a family meeting at her house, inviting me under the guise of reconciliation. I went, hoping for a truce, but it was a trap. Richard, Margaret, Tom, and even my mother sat around a polished dining table, their faces masks of concern. Clara, Margaret began, her voice syrupy. We're worried about you. This obsession with the land, it's unhealthy. Richard slid a contract across the table, offering to buy the grove for a fraction of its worth. Take the money, he said. Start fresh. I stood, my chair scraping the floor. You don't get it, I said. This isn't about money. It never was. Tom followed me to my car, his tone low and threatening. You're making enemies. Clara, we're not going away. I drove off, my hands gripping the wheel, tears blurring the road. Back at the grove, I found solace among the plants, their quiet strength grounding me. Dr. Hart joined me, her presence a reminder that I wasn't alone. You're doing the right thing, she said, squeezing my hand. Rose would be proud. Her words were a lifeline, but the weight of the fight was crushing me. The community rallied harder than I'd expected. A crowdfunding campaign raised enough to cover legal fees, and locals volunteered to patrol the grove, watching for trespassers. One evening, a group of kids left a banner at the gate, Save Rose's Grove. I cried reading it, not from sadness, but from the realization that this fight was bigger than me. It was for them, for Grandma, for every dreamer who'd ever been dismissed. Then came the bombshell. Sarah uncovered a loophole in Richard's legal claim. Grandma's will had a clause requiring unanimous family consent for any sale, and I held the deciding vote. It was a small victory, but it gave us leverage. We used it to push the conservation hearing forward, scheduling it for the following day. My family panicked. Richard called, offering a larger sum. Margaret sent a long email, blaming me for destroying the family. My mother left a voicemail, her voice cracked with guilt. Clara, I'm sorry. I didn't understand. I didn't call her back. Not yet. The night before the hearing, I couldn't sleep. I walked the grove under the stars, the air thick with the scent of Eliza's star. I thought of Grandma and Eliza, two women who'd built something beautiful against all odds. They hadn't backed down, and neither would I. But fear gnawed at me. What if we lost? What if Richard's money and influence won? I knelt by the flowers, my fingers brushing their petals. Help me, I whispered, not sure who I was asking, Grandma, Eliza, or the grove itself. The hearing dawned bright and cold. The courtroom was packed locals, botanists, even the kids who'd made the banner. Sarah presented our case with fire, detailing the grove's ecological and cultural significance. The conservation group's representative spoke of its global importance. I took the stand, my voice steady as I shared Grandma's story, her journal open in my hands. This isn't just land, I said. It's a legacy of love, resilience, and hope. It deserves to be protected. Richard's lawyer argued money development potential, economic benefits. But the judge, an older woman with sharp eyes, seemed unmoved. As the hearing ended, my family sat in the back, their faces pale. They hadn't expected Thesa community united, a story too powerful to dismiss. The judge promised a ruling within days. I left the courtroom, my heart pounding with hope and terror. They'd mocked my inheritance, but now they saw its worth. The question was, would they beg or would they fight dirtier? The days after the hearing were a blur of anxiety and hope. I stayed in Willow Creek, unable to leave the grove, as if my presence could protect it. Locals stopped by with food, stories, and encouragement, their support a balm to my frayed nerves. But my family's silence was deafening. No calls, no texts, no threats. It was worse than their demands. It felt like the calm before a storm. Sarah warned me to stay vigilant. They're not done, she said, her voice grim. People like them don't give up. She was right. 2 days later, I woke to find the grove's gate ajar, the lock smashed. My heart sank as I ran to check the plants. Thankfully, they were untouched, but a pile of surveyor's markers lay scattered nearby. Someone had been scoping the land, likely Richard's doing. I called Sarah, who filed a police report, but the damage was done. They were testing me, pushing to see how far I'd been. I installed new cameras that day, my hands shaking with anger. This wasn't just about money, Anna Maria, it was personal. The community's response was fierce. Volunteers organized night watches, and a local tech was linked the cameras to a live feed. No one's touching Rose's grove, he said, his eyes blazing. Their support gave me strength, but it couldn't erase the betrayal. My mother's silence hurt the most. I'd hoped her apology meant something, but she hadn't reached out since. Had she chosen their side? The thought twisted like a knife. Then came the ruling. Sarah called me to the courthouse, her voice tight with excitement. The judge had approved the grove's status as a protected reserve, citing its unique ecological and cultural significance. I collapsed into a chair, tears streaming down my face. We'd won. The grove was safe, untouchable by developers or my family's greed. Sarah hugged me, laughing, but I felt a strange emptiness. The fight had consumed me, and now that it was over, I wasn't sure what came next. My family didn't take it well. Richard showed up at the house that evening, his face red with fury. "You think you've won?" He spat. "You've ruined us." He ranted about his failing business, how the grove could have saved him. I stood my ground, the journal in my hand like a shield. "You mocked this," I said. "You called it worthless. Now you're begging for a share of what you never valued." He left without another word, but his anger lingered like a storm cloud. Margaret was next, her approach softer but no less desperate. She arrived with a photo album, filled with pictures of Grandma, Mom, and me as a child. "We're family, Clara," she said, tears in her eyes. "Don't shut us out." I wanted to believe her, but the album felt like a prop, a calculated move to guilt me. "You didn't care about Grandma when she was alive," I said. "Why should I trust you now?" She left, her sobs echoing in the driveway. Tom's plea was the most pathetic. He called, his voice slurred with alcohol. "Clara, I'm broke. I need this. Please." I hung up, my heart heavy but resolute. They'd had their chance to value Grandma, to value me. They'd chosen greed instead. But my mother's silence still haunted me. I wrote her a letter, pouring out my hurt, my love for Grandma, my need for her to understand. I didn't send it not yet, but it felt like a step toward healing. The Grove thrived under its new status. Dr. Hart helped me set up a small visitor center, where locals could learn about the plants and Grandma's story. I planted new Eliza's stars, their petals a reminder of resilience. But as I stood in the Grove, the victory felt bittersweet. I protected Grandma's legacy, but at the cost of my family. They'd mocked me, betrayed me, and now they begged. I wasn't sure if I could forgive Femur if I even wanted to. The Grove was safe, but my heart was still a battlefield. Standing among Eliza's stars, their petals glowing in the morning light, I felt Grandma's presence stronger than ever. I kept my promise to her, but the cost was a fractured family and a lingering ache I couldn't shake. The community celebrated locals through a festival for Rose's Grove, with music, tours, and kids planting seeds in her honor. I smiled for photos, but inside, I was wrestling with what came next. My family's begging had stopped, replaced by a cold distance. Could we ever rebuild? Richard made one last attempt, sending a letter through his lawyer, offering to invest in the Grove's maintenance for a share of any future profits. I laughed bitterly, tossing it into the fire. He still didn't get it. This wasn't about money. Margaret retreated into silence, her social media filled with posts about family loyalty that felt like jabs at me. Tom vanished, likely chasing his next get-rich scheme. But my mother's absence hurt the most. I'd mailed her the letter, but she hadn't responded. I wondered if I'd lost her for good. Then, one quiet afternoon, she showed up. Her car rolled into the driveway, and I braced myself, expecting another plea. Instead, she held out a small box. Her eyes red. "These were your grandmother's," she said, her voice soft. Inside were earrings, simple pearls Grandma had worn every day. I was wrong. Clara, I didn't see what she saw in you. We sat on the porch, the Grove humming with life behind us, and talked for hours. She admitted she'd been swayed by Richard's promises, ashamed of her silence. "I'm proud of you," she said finally, and I cried, the weight of her words lifting a burden I hadn't named. The Grove became a beacon. Botanists studied its plants. Schools brought kids to learn, and I started sketching again, capturing its beauty in vibrant illustrations. I published a small book, Grandma's Journal Entries, paired with my drawings dedicated to her and Eliza. It sold modestly, but every copy felt like a victory, a way to share their story. The Grove wasn't just a place. It was a promise kept, a reminder that value isn't always measured in dollars. My family never apologized. Not really. Richard sent a curt note, congratulating me on the Grove's success, but hinting at future opportunities. Margaret invited me to Christmas, as if nothing had happened. Tom resurfaced, asking for a loan. I declined them all, not out of spite, but because I'd learned my worth. Grandma had seen it, and now I did too. I wasn't the quiet girl they'd mocked. I was Clara, the keeper of a legacy, fierce in my love for what mattered. One evening, as the sun set over the Grove, I stood where I'd first found Eliza's star. The air was warm, the flowers swaying like they were whispering secrets. I thought of Grandma's words, "The world's full of secrets if you know where to look." I'd found hers, fought for it, and built something new. My family had mocked my inheritance as worthless, but they'd been wrong. Its true value was in the love it held, the lives it touched, and the strength it gave me to stand tall. I planted a new flower that day, naming it Clara's Hope. It was small, but its roots were strong. Like mine, the Grove would live on, and so would Iscard, but whole. My family might never understand, but I didn't need them to. I had Grandma, Eliza, and a community that believed in me. That was enough.